Uh, so this last week of the semester, the students are not only submitting their reports, but they're also getting the plagiarism reports from Turnitin. And so some teams are surprised to discover that substantial portion of their reports are flagged as basically plagiarized. And so I thought before we get into all of the logistics of the project itself, first we will talk a little bit about plagiarism, both in relation to X-culture, but also in general. So what it is not, why it is bad, and then most importantly, how reports and work has to be written so that it's not flagged for plagiarism. And so we have here one of our long-term professors, Louise Curran. I don't know how long you participated in X-culture, probably like 7 years at least, right?
I did it a couple of years, and then I came out for a couple of years, and now we've been back again for 3. So I've done 5 altogether, I think, but with a break in the middle.
Right, and Louise is a British national living in France, correct?
No, I'm an Irish national.
Irish, big difference, my apology. Right, so yes. Louise, you have some experience with plagiarism. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is not, and basically what students need to know about it in the academic context? Especially some of our students are younger and perhaps have not been long enough in the academic world to pay attention to these things. Can you educate them a little bit about it?
Okay, well, as academics spend all our time worrying about this, it's sometimes difficult for us to understand how difficult it can be sometimes for the students to get it, as it were. And as we grow up, at least I did, before the internet and before all of this was so easy to copy. I think we also had a different way of doing things in the past, in that you had a physical thing that you copied, and by definition you changed things a little bit while doing that. Whereas today, going onto the internet is so easy, and taking a block of text and putting it into work is something I see my children do in like primary school. And I already start with them going, well, like, you can't just do that. Well, mommy, it's fine, it says what it has to say. And he said, well, no, it does, but it doesn't, So trying to get across to students the importance of taking it seriously, I think, is always a challenge for us. Like, I do a session with mine at the very beginning of the report. Mm-hmm. They start to do it before they even start, to say, look, guys, you need to take this seriously because we take it seriously. And I explained to them, from my point of view, I think there's 2 key reasons for that, why it's important. First of all, if a company is reading something and thinks it's interesting, then they need to know where the seed of the idea came from. Right. And so for me, it's very important that the students give them the details of where they have to go. This is the book, this is the report, this is where these numbers in particular, of course, come from. And then it's just a sort of the basic sort of moral question that somebody who's done work should have their work recognized and referenced, which of course for us as academics is particularly important because we spend all our lives writing things that we'd like people to subsequently reference.
Talking about that, so let me ask you this, like, for example, it happened several times in the last 2 days. So we had a few teams that submitted their work to turn it in a week earlier, and then they saw that 1 or 2 team members plagiarized some substantial sections of the report. And they confronted the team member, and the response was, well, my English is not so good, but I found something suitable online. What's the point in me trying to write it in my broken English when I can just simply copy and paste something that somebody already wrote? It fits perfectly. That's exactly what I wanted to say. It's not like those are brilliant ideas. I sort of knew that anyway. So I just simply improved the quality by finding well-written pieces online and using them in my report. What would you respond? What would you say to a comment like that?
Like, I understand the ideas behind that, obviously. Like, I am a native English speaker, so for me, of course, it's easy, and I know, like, many of my students, of course, aren't. Like I work in France, and most of my students are either French or from other countries around the world. But I always say to them, like, the quality of the English is not so important as the quality of the ideas that you're putting into it. And nobody's going to mark you down because the English isn't exactly correct as long as we understand it. But what we want from you is that you bring value to the ideas that you get in your research. And we're assuming, of course, that they'll read several different reports and that they'll bring that all together and then bring their own ideas as well. And if you're cutting and pasting from all over the place, your own ideas are nowhere. So I always say to them, don't worry too much about the quality of the English. If they want to read a perfectly written English report, they'll go to the internet and find one that's been done by PricewaterhouseCoopers or Ernst & Young or something. What they want from you is that you come with your fresh ideas and your youth and your experience and your international group and bring value that is different to what they would get from just cutting and pasting with something they can find anyway. That's my argument there.
Right. One of the sections where we actually see plagiarism sometimes, and usually, by the way, in X culture, it's very hard to find something that is suitable online and copy and paste, because I mean, most of these questions are relatively specific to the company. And it's hard to imagine that somebody wrote a report like this, where it's exactly the same. But one section where we do see a lot, not a lot, but sometimes plagiarize, is the description of the market. So they have to, X-culture teams have to select a new market, and they have to describe that market, in terms of the economic and cultural and whatever other, characteristics. And so what many teams do, they just go to Wikipedia and they have a description of the country there, and they think, oh, maybe let's just copy a couple of paragraphs from here. I was going to talk about the country's economy or culture or politics or climate or, whatever else. And here is a nice article here, so why not just copy and paste? Sometimes they even say, diligently cite Wikipedia. So they would copy 2 pages and say, copy it from Wikipedia. But that would still be counted as plagiarism, right? So if you just simply copy like 2-3 pages and say it comes from Wikipedia, wouldn't it be? Or as long as they mention that it came from somewhere, that's not plagiarism anymore.
Yeah, no, of course, I struggle with this as well, and I'm sure you do with your own students. Like I always say to them, Wikipedia is useful, it's a good reference, but it's not necessarily right all the time. It might have some interesting elements in it. It might not be up to date. It might not be exactly correct. It might not be relevant to exactly what you're doing. Because, as you say, these are very specific cases. And for certain companies, it's interesting to know about elements of the culture. For others, it's more interesting to know about elements of the political context, about the commercial environment, etc. And a cut and paste from Wikipedia is very generic, and something that they can get very easily themselves, of course. So bringing their own value added is very much about that for me. It's about not just taking the easy option, but thinking, well, what exactly should we be saying about this country which is interesting for this particular company, whether it's Oasis Rocket or Kimray or whoever, they're going to have very different elements which are important for them. For instance, those 2 companies. Yeah. So a generic, the US is a big democracy with 250 million people. Can't remember how many people.
330.
Us Europeans is just a big thing over there with lots of Americans. Yeah, those kind of generic
I personally,
I think are very limited use,
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Wikipedia. Not only am I a big fan, I even donate, from time to time they start bugging me, please make a donation. So occasionally I even donate a few dollars, because I think it's a wonderful resource as the first point in your research. So Wikipedia by itself, it's not really, original work. I mean, sometimes people would write something original there, but the beauty of Wikipedia is that the people who write it, most of the time, they're very diligent about providing the sources. And then you go to those references, you find the original studies, you read, you make sure that the Wikipedia author interpreted it correctly. So as a kind of first point in your research, where you start, and from where you go, I think that's a very useful resource. Or if you need to, find some quick summary on a topic, again, without doing your own research, it's perfectly fine. Would I use Wikipedia only? Of course not. Would I use Wikipedia as, initial help? By all means, sure, why not? But then again, I would never cite Wikipedia because, again, Wikipedia usually uses other sources. And so I would go to those other sources, make sure that it's accurate or suitable for me or interpreted correctly on Wikipedia. And if so, I will cite that original study, original publication, original author. So not just the summary on Wikipedia. So
absolutely. Yeah. Like one of the things I do with them on this particular question of explaining a country, explaining the context of a country is also very much about the numbers in the end. How big, how many people, GDP per capita, etc. So we do quite a lot of work on looking at key international sources of that, which often are the sources that are used in Wikipedia anyway. But if you go directly to the World Bank or the IMF or Eurostat in the case of Europe, then you know that you're getting the most up-to-date data, and you know that you're getting comparable data when, for instance, they're comparing between countries. So for me, of course it's a useful source, but it's also useful to just go to the experts, as it were, on the numbers, in particular on the numbers. Yeah, they also use CIA Factbook quite a lot.
Exactly.
Which of course is also a useful source.
Yeah, here I'm just illustrating, I just typed the first thing that came to my mind, like, for example, GDP per capita. And so Wikipedia usually is one of the very first links, so there is really nothing wrong with using Wikipedia. When you look at the numbers here, they say, well, these numbers come from the International Monetary Fund, these come from the World Bank, these come from the United Nations database. Yeah. So Wikipedia is basically only a kind of conduit, so it only takes data from the original sources and conveniently packages it for you. So in this case, there is nothing wrong, for example, in saying that the GDP per capita in Iceland is $74,000. Is it? Oh, that's quite a lot, actually. But anyway.
Yes. There's not very many people in Iceland.
Yeah, so I didn't realize it's that high. So, but in any case, well, actually, the American one is also higher than I remember the last time. But anyway, nothing wrong with using Wikipedia as the link, but then you find it, in fact, it almost looks like they even give you the links to the original, like that's the study where they took it from. This is where it's published. So, yeah. But Lou, let me get, a little further and so ask another thing. So one thing that students, obviously, one mistake that students always make is they would use information from other sources, but not cite it. And so one thing that they do not realize, that there is really nothing wrong with using somebody else's data or ideas or even maybe sometimes quotes, as long as you cite the source. So maybe somebody said something that is relevant in this context. There is nothing wrong in quoting that and then saying, John Smith, 1999, and show the original publication. There is nothing wrong with, for example, showing that the GDP of Iceland is $72,000 and then saying the numbers came from the IMF database. Or maybe, when using or when considering them, pricing strategy, we looked at 5 different methods, listing them all, and then saying they come from this textbook or they come from this publication. So what students sometimes don't realize that, you just need to cite stuff. But then the problem with that is that some students say, oh, as long as I cite, it's not plagiarism. So, and then literally like half of the report or even three quarters of the report, I essentially, copied and pasted stuff, properly cited, but still it's a collection of essentially quotes. So the question I have for you personally, what would be the acceptable percentage of sort of properly cited, quoted material in a report? I mean, I assume 5% wouldn't be a problem, but let's say 80% would be a problem. So, but where's that threshold for you? So at which point you say, yeah, I understand you cited all of the sources, but that's, it's a collection of quotes and not an original work. So what's your take on that?
Well, I know that within the X-Culture project, it's 20, no?
Well, sort of. Yeah, I actually can talk a little bit about that and show original, like real submissions, and we can even together look at it. And by the way, I see here, so maybe with your permission, I see another professor here, Taras Danko. I'd like to invite him to us because he's from yet another country, and I'm curious how things are done. He's in Ukraine. How things are done in Ukraine. So, but first, in France. So, at which point would you become nervous and say, "Yeah, I think that's way too much"? like what percentage of similarity, let's call it, is acceptable to you personally or in your academic environment?
20 already seems quite high to me, I must say. Like if you think about the papers that we would write and the extent to which we would directly cite. Okay, we're academics and we have a lot of experience of writing like this, but in our context, of course, you would only really cite if it's a really key insight that really adds value to what you do.
Yeah.
And I would encourage my students to try and apply the same principle. Of course, they're not so used to it, and it takes, of course, some time. Like we do several exercises when I work with them on X-Culture, because I think it is something that you only learn by actually thinking about it. You know, oh, right, okay, I can't just take 2 paragraphs,
Yeah.
put it in inverted commas and say it's okay. Yes, it's not plagiarism in the sense that we know where it came from, but it is plagiarism in the sense that you're not bringing any added value to what you're doing. So for me, like in my own work, I would say generally there wouldn't be more than 5 that's quotes. For a student who's not so used to it, 10, I guess, is fine. I think 20 is getting a bit high, but I know how you do it because, of course.
Well, we don't really have a threshold per se. I mean, all we do is just we record what it is and then communicate that information to the professors and leave it up to them to decide what to do with it. I want to ask Taras, how does it work in Ukraine with this stuff? Do you check work for plagiarism? Do you pay attention to this? Is it a big problem? And I'm not sure if he's available for the microphone. Anyway, let me do one more thing here. So let me share the screen here and let's get directly to the submissions that came in like literally a couple of hours ago.
Yeah, and I was just wondering about the percentage.
Yeah, and so this is the late track, and so I'm going to open final reports. So we have 881 submissions, and so I'll show to the students what first it looks like when we look at it, but then also together we can take a look and try to decide if these things, how bad they are and how much they matter. So as you see, there are a bunch of submissions that have a 0% what they call similar. Wow. The problem here is that the machine, the computer, the system, turn it in. It doesn't know if it's plagiarism per se or not. All they can tell us is whether or not it's been copied offline. And so in their own system, once I sorted the other end, in their own system, as you see, they start, up to 25%, they still mark it as green. Then more than 25%, they mark it as a yellow, and then even more, they mark it as as orange. And I think at some point it becomes red. So that's sort of the threshold. But let me open this report and let's just take a look and see how bad it is. So as you see, most of them are kind of okay. And I would be a little uncomfortable with 24%. We'll take a look at this one in a minute. Just to see what kind of copying and pasting was that? Was it really, like 2 pages exact copies, or was it like a collection of quotes or something else? But let's take a look at this one, for example. So that's the 50%. So half of this report was copied and pasted. So one thing we can do here is when we look at where the information came from, it actually shows us directly what the source is. And so, for example, like when we look at let me scroll all the way from top to bottom. So it shows me if there is a copied paste, if there is a copied part of the report, it shows me where it comes from, and it highlights it. And so it seems like, where is it now? So I actually don't see anything. So there is something here, but that's the title of the page. So that's not a problem. But then there is this section here, so which tells us that they took the information online and clearly tried to reward it. So they were trying to paraphrase it. And so honestly, I'm not sure if it's a good strategy or bad strategy, because we still see it, like we can still see that it's 2 paragraphs or even more. In fact, it was a couple of pages. It's paraphrased. So they did add a few words that look a little, make it look a little different. But the system knows that it comes from Medium. And if I click here, it will show me the original site where it came from. So, I literally can. And so here it's not clear what to do with that, because I don't see any references to the original work. So it's copied from the internet website called medium.com. And so I see that they tried to paraphrase. It seems like here they're talking about the right differentiation. So they basically talk about the philosophy of marketing. So how to differentiate a product and how to, create a message, and then, patients. So they essentially give a bunch of advice, and they took that advice from a website somewhere else. And I don't see any reference. So in your opinion, Lou, like something like this, would that be a problem?
Oh, absolutely. And I often find, actually, this is quite a good example, because I find myself that when something is plagiarized, it's not necessarily the bit of the report that's the most insightful.
Yeah, actually, in this case, I don't even know if it's useful.
Points not really relevant.
Yeah, it's not even company specific. It's just literally 3 pages from some sort of a blog where, somebody was talking about how to define your message. Let's see, there's another one, also a couple of pages, it seems. So this one comes from Documents Mexico. Good morning, my daughter. So it seems like there is one sentence here. Again, I don't see any reference, any quote, and so it's a direct copy and paste, but there is no source provided. And there's more further down the page. So documents, yeah. So they have like a couple a couple sentences here, a couple sentences here. So essentially the same.
A lot.
In this case, it doesn't even look like they tried to paraphrase it much. So something like this is clearly problematic, and so it adds up to a total of it looks like 50%. I would say that's a problem. And so if you go down the street, so it looks like they have at least a couple dozen sources. Some of them apparently are not really that long. Like, in this case, it seems like they copied and pasted, well, the whole paragraph actually. So, and then there is another one. So another paragraph. So yeah, I would not be very comfortable with a report like this, right? So I don't, seems like it's too much. But let's take a look at the one that has 24%. And so Turnitin took it as green, so acceptable. And so the reason it kind of gives you only the percentage and it doesn't tell if it's plagiarized or not, because again, some of this could be legitimately quoted material. Some of this could be literally the reference to a paper, and so where you have the paper title like that. And so obviously that would be the same wording, but let's see what this team did. And so if it's a problem or not. So if we look at the sources here, so there's like, for example, by USA info, whatever that is. And so that apparently the US Department of Commerce. And so it looks like, it's like short phrases here. So
that's okay.
So it doesn't even look that bad. And I'm not sure, so not sure why. I think Turnitin gets nervous when it's more than 5 words in a row. And so I see this is the case, but it seems like it's not as bad as well, clearly they were trying to copy a little bit here. And I don't know why there is really no source provided again. So they do provide some rules, like an importer needs only a text number or import. So I'm not sure why they wouldn't say, for example, as stated on the US Department of Commerce. So they could have said where it comes from. So, but instead they just basically gave me a, So let's see what else we have here. So there is another source. So these guys didn't really shamelessly copied pages and pages. Oops, sorry, I think I closed.
Or at least not in the bit we looked at.
Well, let me open a different one. I think I accidentally closed that one. Oh, here it goes back. So Lake Louise looks fine. Oh, actually has a similar name to yours, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's one of the most beautiful lakes probably in the world, not only in Canada. But anyway, so snowforecast.com. So they're looking at the website that talks evidently about snow forecast, and it's a ski resort, so it's important. But it looks like, yes, they literally copy like entire paragraphs here. And so I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a reference. I think that's one, maybe. So I don't know, it almost looks like that's how they were trying to reference their, to provide a citation. It's a strange format, I don't recognize it, so I'm not sure what I or one is here. But at the same time, I wonder, so these, apparently it looks like these are quotes from the customers.
Yeah.
And so in this case, maybe it's even appropriate to do that because apparently they wanted to show what the customers are saying about the ski resort online. So these are customer reviews, and I'm not even sure if they said where they come from.
I think at the top they do. No, okay.
Yeah, so I think if they said where exactly it comes from, and because it's supposed to be a quote, I suppose it's not a big problem. I mean, if
very long.
Yeah, so I guess
you really need the stuff about my wife was bored, blah blah. Like it's these things of like being pertinent. Like, of course, it's interesting to know what the others, what the customers have said, but you don't need the whole quote. You know, it's these
Probably,
kind of things.
especially that many, right? Yeah, so it's interesting. So I don't know. I mean, if it's really, you know, a customer review, maybe you need to mention that because, and I'm not sure why it references the same thing multiple times. Could it be possibly that the same quote, the same customer review appears in multiple websites? Because I see ski deals. Yeah, it's like, you know, appears the same paragraph appears in multiple sources. So maybe it's even a customer review that shows up on multiple websites. So yeah, the same, that's interesting. The same thing comes up over and over again. It's not double counted because if they count, you know, if they added all these 5%, the total would be like 50. So it seems like it's still counted only once, but you know.
They're plagiarizing something that's already been plagiarized many times. Is that what it is?
Yeah, unless other websites again don't want to do their own review, and so as a result,
Yeah.
what they do is they just copy, you know, like from some original source. But in any case, that's basically what we sort of see when we go into the system. And in many cases, as I said, what we can do is we can give the professors the total number, but then leave it up to the professors to decide what to do with these numbers, because some of them are clearly problematic. Others, if it's a customer review, maybe that's what you need to copy, but at the very least explain where it came from so that the, you know, the reader knows that it's not your own research. You didn't interview that customer, you went to this website and that's where you found it. So
Yeah.
here again, something that is, it seems like it's some sort of a, again, tip on how to get the gold membership category, whatever that is. And so they're quoting some rules from some site, but it's strange that they don't really explain where it comes from unless it's member companies 2019. Maybe that's the source.
No, I think it must come from the AmCham website. It looks like it's that. But
Yeah.
like, you don't need to give that kind of detailed information anyway. You just send them to the website, you know.
Maybe so, yeah. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes it's not a, you know, exact science. I mean, sometimes you can see right away that it's a plagiarized, you know, part of work. Sometimes you see that, well, it's clearly a properly cited, you know, source, quote, or whatever it is. And sometimes it's something that doesn't even need to be here because it doesn't add value to the paper. And at the same time, it's there. So, but anyway, that's essentially what we have. And honestly, it's actually not too bad. So when you look at, and you know, we have almost 1,000 teams so far, 900 submitted. And so it's only what, about 20 or so that are really problematic. And then another maybe 50, 60 where, you know, it seems like some sections I'm not very comfortable with, but overall it's not bad. So it's plagiarism is not as prevalent as it used to be. In fact, if I go, let me see if I will be able to find older assignments. I think it doesn't keep in the memory all of the old assignments. But if I go to one, like for example, let me show you one, for example, from 2015. So if I go to 2015, 2A, or let's take 2. Okay, 2A is good enough. And so if I open this report here, so that's what, 4 years ago, you will see that at that time we saw much more plagiarism. And so if I go all the way, so it's a smaller track, fewer teams, not that bad. So we had a few teams that literally copied and pasted the whole thing, like 92%. I don't even know where it could be also some sort of a technical error. Maybe like 2 team members submitted different versions of the report. But well, maybe not so bad either, because you have about 10 submissions out of what, about maybe 60.
It was much less, was it 100 or something?
Yeah, so it was an early track, so it's fewer teams. But yeah, let me open one of these just, you know, as an example of how sometimes they copy the whole thing. And so if that happens, that's really problematic. So the only thing that I want to take, yes, so in this case, and by the way, that's very important for the students. Sometimes this happens. University of New South Wales. And so what you know, like what you should know what that is, the university that pays for our access to turn it in is the Australian University of New South Wales. And we're extremely grateful that they are giving us access to turn it in, because it's an expensive platform. If we had to pay for it on our own, we wouldn't have the money. Now, what happens in this case, that in addition to scouting the internet for all of the possible copy and pasted, you know, quotes, it also has its own depository. And because our students submit their work to this university, essentially, it checks all the submissions against its own database. And so what happens sometimes is that the team gets nervous if they submitted the report or not, and then one team member submits it, and then another team member creates an account and submits another copy of the report on behalf of the team. Now, Turnitin doesn't know that the 2 people are on the same team. It thinks that it's one student from the same university copied work of another student. And so it says, 92% copied material. And so what we do in cases like this is we go into, let me remember where it is, they call it exclude sources. So let me just see where the sources. So somewhere here we would go into the system and we would exclude sources. Let me see how we do it.
Okay.
And then we would literally just click here. Let me see how, somewhere here we would exclude the University of New South Wales because that university match overview. Where is the new, they changed the interface from time to time. And we would literally exclude this as a source. I think that's where we do it. And once we exclude it,
it happened to one of my students last year.
5-7%. But yes, when you look at this, let me see, copied and pasted material, it shows up as University of New South Wales, which is essentially, team 104. And when we look, well, it's actually interesting. So business proposal 104, and here we have business proposal 536. So that's actually problematic. It seems like two teams cooperated a little too much. In fact, in this case, it's almost a problem, unless one team member was kicked out from the team. But no, we actually have the whole team. So this does look like one team copied work of another team. So that's a little strange. So, but sometimes it happens that two students from the same team submit their own. The system basically thinks that it's, I have no idea where they put now exclude sources, because it used to be right there, but we'll have to find.
No, that's what happened to my student last year. It was that two people sent it in, and she was really stressed because she was like, "Oh, it's saying 95%. It's not possible. What do we do?"
And exactly. So when you see that, don't panic. We know about this issue, and we always check for it. And if it happens to be the submission from the same team twice, we will go and manually exclude sources. Now, the only thing, if I only remembered how, I remember how to do it. The problem is that it seems like they changed the interface, so I'll need to figure out how to do it for this semester. But one of my assistants will literally go through all submissions that have more than 20% to check if there is a problem with this case. So if you see 80% plagiarism or similarity rate and you don't know where it came from, know that it's probably not a problem, and we will deal with that. So. Yeah,
but we don't seem to have it this year because the highest is 50. So.
Yeah. Okay. So anything else we want to share about plagiarism before we talk about the logistics? Because there are a few other things I wanted to discuss. Anything else you'd like to add? I'm not sure, Taras. I'm not sure if you have the microphone. Would you like to add something maybe to our discussion? And Louise, did we miss anything?
It was just a comment on things that's often students consider to be kind of commonly known and unnecessary to explain. And we just saw it in one of the reports we went through. For example, the Porter's 5 forces. Who is Porter? And when did he write about the 5 forces? They consider that certain things are just generic. Everyone knows who Porter is, and everyone knows what the 5 forces are. And they don't.
That's true.
So even things that they think everybody knows because they've done it in class several times and a couple of different teachers might have talked to them about it, it doesn't mean that they don't have to reference it. It doesn't mean that the people who are reading it, the professionals that are reading it, won't want to perhaps go and see what Porter was talking about with his 5 forces.
And that's a very, very good point, because on the one hand, the students are not pretending that they came up with this 4 forces, diamond. So they're not really claiming the idea as their own. They just don't give credit to Michael Porter. And so that obviously, on the one hand, imagine students, one day you will come up with something that everybody will, use and quote. And how would you feel if somebody uses your work without, acknowledging your authorship? But more importantly, it sort of, takes away from your credibility as well. I mean, why not properly cite it so it looks professional? It just seems like it's, half-baked product. So I don't know. Yeah. All right, so students, we see a few students here, and thank you so much for participating. Usually we see a big drop in participation in webinars this week because, they finally submitted the reports. They finally, so stressful last week of the semester, Thanksgiving in the United States. So they want to take some time off, but I see we have a few participants here. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. You can raise your hand and can join us by simply, we will add you as a speaker, or you can type your questions in Q&A window. And meanwhile, while you're building up the courage to ask your questions, I'll just give a quick update on where we stand at this time with Xculture. So we have just submitted the final reports, And literally right after this meeting, I will go through the submissions, download all 900 of them. We'll spend some time relabeling them, because even though we told you to name the reports using your team number so that we know where the report came, but as you saw in that submission, sometimes people put, like, things like final report, or final file November 27th. And so you have to open that file, see what your team number was, and then basically label it, team 777, for example, so that the professors can easily find them. And starting today, professors will be able to start evaluating those reports. And so the way we do it is that each report is evaluated by the professors whose students are on that team. So there is a team of 6 students, there would be 6 professors, that would be 6 sets of evaluations. One thing that I would like to say here, and this is extremely, extremely important, some of the students experience sometimes challenges with some of the team members who are not actively participating in the project. And so the students think that they are, unlucky to have a bad team, that, oh, my team members are not all of them working hard. The truth is that it's nothing, has nothing to do with bad luck or, you having a bad team. The truth is that people sometimes are not very responsible and very diligent about things that they need to do. And so just like you sometimes have team members who do not deliver what they need to do on time, the same thing happens in every team: corporate team, paid teams, not paid teams, students, and professors. So for example, one of the issues that I will have to deal with is to send reminders to the professors who will not have done their evaluations on time. So professors have about 10 days to complete their work, and about 60% of them will do it on time. Another maybe 30% will do it late, but still do it. And there will be probably another 10–20% who will never submit their evaluations. And I will send them reminders. And in the end, what we'll do is we'll just hire some graduate students, train them how to do it, and then at some point they will do some additional evaluation. And so it's life, it's humans, it happens. And the biggest value of X-Culture is specifically to give you this sort of preview of what it is to work with people from other countries and people in general. And so it will not be any different when you do it the next time. There will be always someone who will not deliver on time. But anyway, most professors will do their work well and diligently and responsibly. And so once we have those evaluations, we will put them all in one file. In fact, I can even show you what that file looks like. So we have one, for example, for the early track. So the early track is already done. And so we have this one file that we call final reports. So that's where we have, where's the final reports? That's where we have the collection of submissions from the early track. As you see now, it's all neat and relabeled, and each file has the name corresponding to the team member. But then we have another file where we have the report evaluations. And so that's where the professors submitted those evaluations to us. And we consolidated them in the file that looks like this. So we have one page where we have all of the evaluations, like, for example, report number 114. And so we had professor named Charles Bryant. He evaluated the report. And then we have professor named, where's the other name? Here, Daniela Acosta. And then we have another professor here, Louise Torres, and so on and so on. And that's where all of those evaluations are consolidated. Like, for example, report number 154 was evaluated by 5 people. These are the names, this is the company name, and these are the averages. And so on average, the rating was 4.5. And these are the combined comments. We even have the statistics here for agreement. So we'll look at how much agreement the professors had about the report. Like, for example, when you look at the report 158, so it was evaluated by a total of 3 professors, but they had a perfect agreement. So they were exactly in agreement what the report should get. So they get 5.7 on average, and everybody gave exactly the same grade. But then when you look at some other report, like, for example, here, let's say this one. So there were 5 people who evaluated this report. And as you see, there is a big difference in how they evaluated it. So some people gave high rate grades, some people gave low grades, and so there was some disagreement. So the average was 4.3, but it looks like there were some people who gave high grades to this report and some who gave low grades to this report. And so what we do sometimes is when we have submissions or ratings with high disagreement, Sometimes they invite an additional professor or graduate student to take another look and sort of reconcile those differences. So sometimes that happens too. Interesting, for example, there is this report here. So as you can see, everybody gave all 7th. There were 4 people, and all 4 professors gave perfect 7 on every dimension. So I don't know what they did there, but that's a candidate for maybe winning the, we will, when we select the winners, we always look again at those evaluations, but it seems like 4 people gave perfect 7 on every dimension for every question. So that definitely means that it was probably a good, piece of work. So, but that's what we do in the next couple of weeks. Then another thing we're going to do is we will, once we have the ratings of the reports, we will send those reports to the client companies. And so hopefully they will read the reports, but some companies will be getting 200-300 of the reports, and that's like this much paper. So not all executives will have the time to read all of them. And so we will send them 2 more things in addition to the reports. One, we will send them the professor's ratings. And so this way, if they don't have the time to read every single one, at least they can start with the ones that got higher evaluations and then go down the list. So this way they will read the most interesting ones. But second, we are also trying to send them what we call the executive analytics summary. So we are hiring additional graduate students, train them how to summarize the reports. And so what they will do is they will read all, let's say, 300 reports that the company gets. They will try to summarize the most interesting ideas like on 10, 20, 30 pages. So they will give you the most common suggestions, and they give you like average, recommended price and, competition analysis, all of the listed competitors and maybe all of the listed potential collaborators or partners. And so the executives, even if they don't have the time to read every single report, they will have a nice summary so that all of the ideas that you provided to them, they can still, review them from that summary. One thing that we don't do, and I really would like to do, is presentations of the team work, teams presenting their work to the companies. In the perfect world, we would like every team to be able to present their work, to get feedback, to be able, to ask questions and, provide the answers. The problem with that is that we have almost 1,000 teams, and that is 1,300 if you combine the both tracks. And even if we give each team, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you can imagine that it would be nonstop presentations for like 1 hour. So obviously it's not realistic. We don't have that time. The clients don't have that time, so it's impossible to do it. So one thing we do sometimes is, and we'll see if we want to do it this semester, is once we select the best teams, maybe we will ask those best teams to do live presentations to the clients so that the clients get a better idea as to what teams worked on. Other teams can learn from your experience. But even that is somewhat problematic because, again, let's say we go with 1 or 2 best teams per company, and we have 11 companies this time. That's still like 20 presentations. And so usually it takes about 15 minutes or so. So that's like half a day affair still. And, maybe even that may be difficult to organize just because it's so, many moving parts and everybody's in a different time zone. So we always struggle with that. We always want to do it, but logistically, it's not always easy to do. So, but anyway.
Have you ever done it?
Was that?
Have you ever done it?
We've done it several times with the non-university students. So we have this group of students we call Culture Academy. And so especially with the kids, we would like to give them that opportunity. And we've done it several times when the group was small. Like the first time we did it, there were only like 8 teams or something like that. The next time it was like 12 teams. So, but even now with them, it's like almost 100 teams of the academy students. And so with those, again, it's already too many. Again, so it's now becoming also very difficult to do it with them. And we've done a few times where we asked some companies to kind of listen to presentations of the best teams. Again, doable when you have fewer companies and when you go only with the best teams, but even then it becomes problematic because, different time zones, not everybody is able to attend live presentations. What happened was that for some teams, it was only one person presenting on behalf of the team, so sort of kind of hard to organize. Another thing we do, and actually that works pretty well, is we ask the teams to do the presentations and record themselves, like using Zoom or using any other video recording software. and send us the video files. And in that case, we can have a collection, and then we can send it to the companies, select the best ones. And it's almost as a presentation. The only problem is that you cannot have the discussion afterwards. And so it also becomes a little, halfway sort of. And then one more thing we do is that at many universities, professors organize presentations of their own students. Like, for example, at our school, what we do sometimes and plan to do this semester, the members of the teams that just completed the project will do the presentations for the new cohort of the students in January. So once is selected, we can invite, maybe 5-6 students who will do those 5-6 presentations. And so this way, first for the students, it's a chance to present their work. And sometimes they would actually invite their team members to join by Skype. So it's almost like a team presentation. But for the new generation of the students, it's kind of getting introduced to the project. So they see what other teams did. They sort of learn from them. And in most cases, we even pay more attention, not so much to the presentation of the report itself, to the discussion afterwards. So we ask them to talk a little bit about the challenges they experienced, a little bit about the things they did, to overcome those challenges. So it's almost like experience sharing in general, not just presentation of a particular business idea. And so that works pretty well, as I said, but that would be within one university. We may try to streamline, like to stream it live on YouTube, or maybe record and then share later. But again, that wouldn't be the same thing as kind of having a big conference where everybody's present at the same time and can ask questions. So we'll see what we'll do this year, but we might want to try that as well. But yeah, so we should have the report evaluated by about December, let's say 15th. Then of those, we will select usually 10 best for every company. So there will be like 100 best finalists. And at that point, there will be professors who will volunteer to be on the best team or award committee. And so there will be probably about 10 professors. And we will ask them to read those 10 reports one more time. And of those, select one best for each company. And so this way, there will be not one single winner, but there will be one per company. And this semester, by the way, it's very good because every company has at least 50-60 teams working on the challenge. And some are more popular. I think the most popular has like 280 or something like that. But it's still, like 100 or so plus or minus. So pretty balanced, because some semesters we may have some companies that have only like 5 teams working on the challenge. This time it's pretty good. So everybody has at least a few dozen teams. And because it's not always possible to compare, submissions for Kim-Ray versus submissions for the Oasis rocket, but at least there is a reasonable, balance in terms of the number of teams per company, and so we can select one best for each client. And so probably around December 25th or so, we will be able to announce the winners. And so that's the time when everybody will get their personal sort of post-project documentation, which will include a performance review, a recommendation letter, a very detailed recommendation letter that talks about what you did, what you learned, skills, performance review. So everything that your future employer or, recruiter might want to know about you. And then in addition, your certificate. And we will probably also include a review of your performance on the tests that students took. So like cultural intelligence, IQ, whatever other tests you took this time. So this way you will have it all. And if you ever need it when applying for schools, or jobs, you will have that in your portfolio. And the members of the winning teams will get an additional certificate that says they won the competition, and so kind of a little extra, to signify their performance. And that's basically it. So we will do 2 more things then before the semester is over. One, we will also select the best professors. And again, out of 187 professors this time, it's impossible to select one best, but we will look at multiple criteria, and usually we will select about 10-15 best professors whose students did extremely well and were happy, but also who helped us in many ways. Like there are some professors like Louise here, takes her time on a Saturday evening, I guess, for you, and helps us with the webinar. But also many professors help with, additional evaluations, and, like some really go above and beyond and invest a lot of time and effort making sure that the project goes well. So that is also taken into account. And then also the best students will get invitations both to apply to the X-Culture coaching program, but also to the Singapore symposium in the summer. And then we'll have another one back in the United States in the fall. That those invitations will go a little later. So usually we invite a sizable group of people, but top 20% or so the best ones. And that's when it will basically be over for the semester, and it will be right before the next semester starts. So we'll be busy then with recruitment and all those applications and stuff for the next semester. But yeah, That's basically where we will stop. So I'm not sure any questions. So I saw a couple of questions, but they were sort of kind of generic and we have answered them. So not sure there are any additional questions, but other than that, I think I've covered everything that I was planning to. Okay, well, thank you so much. So we have another webinar in 7 minutes with the coaches. Thank you so much, Louise, for your time, for being here with us this weekend. Very nice. For those of you who attended here, what's interesting, Louise, is I'm looking at the names who's attending, and so we have only like 10 people this time, so most will be watching probably the recording, but it's interesting that it's always the same people. And so it seems like those who are, you know, responsible and diligent, they are always responsible and diligent, and those who don't care, they never.
Even after they've given in the report, that's quite amazing.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm glad to see some of the familiar names here. So, you know, if you guys need a special recommendation ever, I'll be happy to write it to you because, you know, it's got to be worth something to be present here every week after week after week. So it matters to me.
Maybe you'll see them in Singapore.
Yeah, and yes, truly hope to see you in Singapore. That's true. And I hope to see you in Singapore too. Are you planning to go there, please?
Honestly, I don't know yet. Just for your information, we've launched a program where our foundation helps 2 students every year to go to the symposium. So we send 2, as you know, to Calgary.
Yeah.
And that initiative, X-Culture and the sponsorship, has been nominated for the Inspiring Life Awards in my university here.
Yeah.
And we'll find out in January if we win the awards. X-Culture and the symposium and the support of the foundation were interesting enough for the jury for them to nominate it. So we're fingers crossed.
What we are trying to do is to raise some funds for travel stipends for professors. We know that some professors get a lot of funding from the university, but because the symposium is not really a conference, you know, in a traditional sense, sometimes getting money for travel for professors to those events is difficult. And so I literally sent out an email to all 10 companies or 11 companies that participated this semester, asking if they would be willing to sponsor both students, but also professors to attend the symposium. And honestly, I mean, as much as I would like to help students to attend the event, I'm even more so interested in professors attending the event. And the reason for that is that for students, it's, you know, it's useful, it's, you know, fun, but they come, they, you know, develop their professional network, you know, skills, and then they go and yes, you know, they sometimes send us nice emails, you know, sometimes even for years, but that's basically it. Whereas if we invite a professor, so obviously the professor is sort of, you know, a more direct investment. So the professor gets to know other professors, students. In many cases, they become better at this job. So, you know, managing the next cohort of students. So I'm kind of lately has become more interested in developing, you know, these relationships with professors. And so this time I specifically requested, you know, kind of gave the calculations to the companies, how much it costs for a professor to travel, depending on the country, depending on the, you know, distance. But we are talking about $2,000, you know, total cost. And so my hope is that there will be some of the companies who will say, all right, we'll sponsor 2 professors this time. And so we'll see how things go. But, you know, as I said, some professors definitely not only deserve to be there, but would benefit greatly from being there. We would benefit from them being there. And sometimes it's a matter of money. And so hopefully with the sponsors' help, we will be able to at least, you know, bring an extra, I don't know, 5, 10, maybe professors so that they can keep there with us. So
I think there is a lot of interest in it, and sometimes it's just a question of being a bit bold and asking, which is what we did, and people actually find it very interesting, and they go, oh yeah, maybe we could do that. We're not talking about huge amounts of money either, but of course companies are always being asked on all sides for sponsorship. So, but it is a very unique experience, and certainly my students have all really enjoyed it and found it extremely rich as an experience. So that's attractive, you know.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. I see in your time zone, it seems like it's dark outside already. So yeah, it's still morning here.
It's getting dark. It's also pouring rain.
Yeah, same thing. It's raining here as well. It's still morning. It's only 11 o'clock a.m., but it's been raining for a while. I woke up to a rain. So
yeah, I hope you have a nice weekend in spite of having to look through 1,000 reports in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, good to see you again, and thank you so much. And I'll go to the next webinar here. All right.
See you again soon. Thanks, Vas. Bye-bye.